The room falls silent, not because you have shouted, not because you have raised a fist, but because you did not move at all. There is a reason Machiavelli believed silence was sharper than any sword. It is not the absence of words that terrifies, it is the presence of possibility. When you do not speak, every person around you is forced to wonder what you might say, what you might do, and what you are planning that they cannot see. The silent weapon is the most effective because it is invisible until it cuts. Imagine entering a meeting where your rivals expect you to argue. They have rehearsed their lines, prepared their evidence, polished their sarcasm. They are ready for your defense. The average person will answer with explanations, counter-arguments, or nervous laughter. But you, guided by the Machiavellian rule of silence, simply wait. You fold your hands. You tilt your head slightly. You let the air grow heavy. Suddenly, their confidence begins to shake. Their performance was designed to provoke a reaction. When you do not react, the script collapses. They stumble, fill the space with rambling words, and expose their weakness. You never lifted a finger, but already you have one. Machiavelli understood that in every battle of power there are two fields, the field of words and the field of perception. Most people fight on the first, talking endlessly, defending, justifying, clarifying, but the true player of power operates on the second, shaping how others feel, not what they hear. Silence, when intentional, twists perception. It makes you appear calm when others are frantic, strong when others are uncertain, and dangerous when others are too curious. The one who controls the frame does not need to fill it with noise. He lets others choke on their own words. Think of the courtroom of life. Every day you are accused of arrogance, of selfishness, of incompetence. The crowd wants a confession or a defense. Most people give both. They rush to clean their reputation, believing that if they talk long enough, the world will see the truth. But Machiavelli would laugh at this hope. He knew that truth is irrelevant when perception is already poisoned. Words of defense sound like guilt because they confirm the accuser had the right to accuse. To answer is to kneel. To kneel is to submit, and to submit is to lose. The silent man, by refusing the trial, proves he was never a defendant. He is the judge. There is a psychological effect known to strategists, projection. When you say nothing, others project their fears, their doubts, and their suspicions onto you. Silence becomes a mirror. It reflects not your weakness, but their own. The rival who calls you manipulative will begin to wonder if perhaps he is. The critic who mocks your authority will start to question why he needs to mock at all. In their desperation to fill your silence, they reveal their insecurities. You have said nothing, but the room now knows who is fragile. Machiavelli once wrote that men judge more by what they see than what they hear. If this is true, then silence forces them to see what is not there. And what is not there is always more frightening than what is. An enemy can prepare for a threat he recognizes. He cannot prepare for a threat he imagines. Silence makes you appear unpredictable, and unpredictability breeds fear. This is why armies sometimes march at night without torches, why rulers sometimes disappear from public view, why the strongest leaders speak the least. They know that the imagination of the crowd will exaggerate dangers far greater than any speech could describe. Picture a social setting, a dinner with friends or colleagues. A sly jab is thrown in your direction. You always act like you know everything, someone says, expecting laughter. Everyone turns to see what you will do. The weak smile nervously, pretend it is a joke, or explain why they are not like that. You instead sip your drink, eyes calm, lips sealed. The table waits. The silence stretches. The attacker begins to shift uncomfortably. "I was just joking," they add quickly. The others look at them, not you. In their attempt to wound you, they have exposed themselves as insecure. You have done nothing, yet you walk away with respect that cannot be forced. There is also a deeper reason silence works. It controls tempo. In chess, the player who dictates the pace wins, not necessarily the one with more pieces. In conversation, the same law applies. The one who reacts is always behind. The one who waits controls the rhythm. Silence buys time. It slows the game. It forces others to reveal more while you reveal less. The more they reveal, the more predictable they become. The less you reveal, the more mysterious you appear. Machiavelli would say that power does not belong to the loudest voice, but to the calmest presence. Let us step into another scenario, an online attack. Someone posts about you, mocks you, calls you names, spreads rumors. The natural impulse is to respond, to correct, to defend. But the silent weapon has no account to defend itself. When you do not answer, you rob them of oxygen. Their words echo in an empty chamber. The crowd begins to notice not your silence, but their obsession. Why are they still talking about you when you have not spoken once? Who looks guilty now? Who looks obsessed? In the absence of your voice, their voice becomes a confession. You never joined the fight, yet they lost it. Silence is also a stage for selective strikes. To remain silent is not to remain passive. It is to wait for the perfect moment when one sentence will cut deeper than 1,000. Machiavelli knew that words used rarely become weapons. The less you speak, the more every word carries weight. A man who talks all day will not be remembered. A man who speaks once in silence will never be forgotten. This is why leaders pause before speaking, why interrogators remain quiet until suspects cannot bear it, why masters of influence let others drown in noise before dropping one calm, final truth. But be warned, silence without presence is nothing. If you look nervous, silence becomes weakness. If you look lost, silence becomes confusion. If you look calm, composed, and deliberate, silence becomes intimidation. It is not only about what you do not say, but how you do not say it. Stillness in the body, steady eyes, controlled breath. These are the marks of silence as power. Machiavelli would remind you that silence is not emptiness. It is theater. You must hold the stage even when your lines are unspoken. The silent weapon terrifies because it reverses roles. The accuser becomes the performer, the critic becomes the fool, and the enemy becomes the one trembling in uncertainty. You, the silent one, become the mirror, the shadow, the presence that cannot be measured. And as long as they cannot measure you, they cannot control you. Silence, then, is not absence. It is presence multiplied. It is not retreat. It is advance without motion. It is not weakness. It is strength made invisible until it decides to strike. You may believe silence is simply the art of holding your tongue, but Machiavelli knew it is much more than that. Silence is a strategy, a weapon of misdirection, a cloak that hides your hand until you are ready to strike. Words can be twisted, replayed, and mocked, but silence cannot be undone. It lingers, echoing louder than the noise it replaces. It is the empty space that forces others to fill it, and in their scramble to explain what you did not say, they reveal truths you could never have extracted by force. Imagine a business negotiation. Your opponent makes an offer, one that seems generous on the surface but hides a trap beneath. The average negotiator would rush to respond. They would counter, argue, or attempt to explain why the deal does not benefit them. In doing so, they reveal their priorities, their weaknesses, and the boundaries of their patience. A Machiavellian strategist, however, allows the silence to grow. The other party begins to sweat. They speak again, sweetening the deal, exposing what they are truly desperate for. Without uttering a word, you have shifted the balance of power. This is not passive. This is dominance disguised as restraint. Machiavelli taught that people are slaves to appearances. If you appear rattled, you are weak. If you appear unbothered, you are strong. Silence creates the illusion of unshakable composure. Even when you feel unsure, silence makes you appear confident. And perception, not reality, governs human interaction. The world is not controlled by facts but by frames. Silence frames you as a mystery, and mystery is more powerful than certainty. A man fully explained is a man already conquered. A man who remains unreadable is feared. Consider the realm of personal relationships. An accusation arises, "You do not care about me anymore." The common response is panic. Words tumble out, promises, reassurances, explanations. But every word digs the hole deeper. Why? Because by defending yourself, you validate the accusation's authority. You prove that the other person has the right to judge your care. Machiavelli would counsel something colder. Pause. Let the words hang. Do not rush to correct or beg. After a silence heavy enough to command attention, say only, "That is not how I see it." No pleading, no defense. Just calm detachment. The other person now questions their own drama. Were they too emotional? Too reactive? In your stillness, they begin to doubt themselves. You are no longer the accused. You are the mirror reflecting their insecurity. The battlefield of silence also extends into the digital world. Social media thrives on reaction. Every comment, every insult, every provocation is bait. When you bite, you feed the fire. Silence, however, starves it. The more someone attacks you online while you remain untouched, the more obsessed they appear. The crowd begins to notice not your silence, but their desperation. They look unstable while you look untouchable. This is Machiavelli's game. Let the enemy burn their credibility while you maintain yours simply by refusing to play. Quotable lines spring from this doctrine. He who explains submits, he who waits controls. Words may clarify, but silence dominates. Machiavelli would remind you that control is never about what you prove. It is about what others believe. And when you refuse to fill the silence, they believe you know something they do not. Fear grows in that gap. The fear that you are stronger, smarter, or more dangerous than you appear. That fear is worth more than any argument. Now let us look at another scenario. The insult delivered in public. Perhaps at work? Perhaps among friends, someone decides to undermine you with a sly remark. The average person laughs it off or argues back. But Machiavelli understood that laughter is still submission, and argument is worse. The silent weapon means you do not respond at all. You simply turn your gaze toward the speaker, let a beat of silence fall, and then calmly shift the conversation elsewhere. The room notices. The attacker feels exposed. Their joke falls flat. The silence you delivered was heavier than any witty comeback. You did not join their game. You ended it. Silence also serves as armor. In times of chaos, when rumors fly and accusations multiply, the loudest voices are often destroyed by their own noise. The one who remains silent, however, becomes untouchable. He is not dragged into petty conflicts. He is not quoted, misquoted, or mocked. He stands above the storm while others drown in it. Machiavelli knew that sometimes the greatest act of strength is not to fight, but to watch others destroy themselves while you remain perfectly still. Yet silence is not only defensive. It can be weaponized offensively. Consider a rivalry at work. Instead of openly competing, you say nothing about your ambitions. You do not brag, you do not argue, you do not reveal. Your rival, desperate to prove themselves, overplays. They boast, they expose their insecurities, they make reckless moves. Then when the opportunity arises, you strike cleanly. And because no one saw your ambition coming, your rival collapses. Silence was not absence, it was camouflage. Machiavelli would point out that silence creates space for interpretation. People cannot resist interpreting silence, and their interpretations are usually worse than reality. A quiet pause in a meeting may be read as deep calculation. A refusal to answer a provocation may be seen as contempt. A calm stare may be mistaken for hidden knowledge. None of these require you to reveal anything. Silence allows others to write stories in their own minds, and those stories often make you larger than life. Why tell them who you are? When silence lets them imagine you as something greater. There is a reason spies and interrogators rely on silence as much as questions. Leave someone in a silent room and they will eventually speak, revealing secrets to fill the void. Leave someone to stew in silence after they insult you, and they will eventually backtrack, explain, even apologize without being asked. Silence bends others to your will without you moving. It is the purest form of control. Think of a throne room. The courtiers chatter, flatter, gossip. The ruler sits silent, speaking rarely. Every word he does utter is amplified by scarcity. Every pause is magnified into importance. Machiavelli saw that silence is not just about withholding. It is about creating demand. When you do not speak often, people lean in, desperate to hear you. When you do not defend yourself, people defend you for you. When you do not react, people react in your favor. Silence makes you the sun around which others orbit, while noise makes you one more planet spinning out of control. To master the silent weapon, you must also master your body. Words may be absent, but signals are constant. A still face, calm breathing, steady posture. These turn silence into power. Fidgeting, glancing away, nervous movements, these turn silence into weakness. Machiavelli would command you to train your stillness until it becomes second nature. Let others fume, shout, joke, plead. You remain immovable. The silent rock in a storm of noise. The crowd will notice. Respect will follow. The power of silence lies in how it flips roles. When you do not respond, the accuser is left performing. The critic is left rambling, the enemy is left swinging at smoke. You become untouchable not because you fought, but because you refused to fight. And in that refusal, you proved something greater, that you are beyond their reach. Silence elevates you. Silence protects you. Silence weaponizes their own insecurity against them. And in a world addicted to noise, silence is the most dangerous sound of all. The silent weapon reaches its final form not in single encounters, but in the legacy it creates. Machiavelli understood that the man who explains himself is always chained to the opinions of others, while the man who holds his silence becomes larger than life. Silence does not just shape moments, it shapes myths, and myths are stronger than any argument. Think of the powerful figures who have left their mark on history. Rarely were they remembered for endless speeches or long-winded defenses. They were remembered for the times they did not answer, for the questions they allowed to linger, for the cold stare that spoke more than words ever could. Julius Caesar is remembered not for every declaration, but for the pauses that made others lean in. Leaders throughout history have been feared not because they shouted, but because they withheld. Silence wrapped them in mystery, and mystery turned into power. In everyday life, this same principle applies. When you refuse to explain yourself, people talk. They speculate. They wonder why you did not respond, why you did not defend, why you did not justify. Their imagination does the work for you. And the human imagination always paints darker, stronger, and more compelling pictures than reality. One unanswered insult can grow into a legend of strength. One unspoken reply can echo for years. Machiavelli would tell you that power does not come from controlling the narrative directly. It comes from making others create the narrative you want without even realizing it. But silence is not merely defensive or mysterious. It can be used as a deliberate psychological weapon. Consider a rival who insults you repeatedly in front of others. You never answer. You simply remain calm, indifferent, untouchable. Over time, the audience grows weary of the spectacle. They see not you under attack, but your rival desperately trying to wound a man who does not bleed. Eventually, the crowd begins to turn. They defend you, not because you asked them to, but because they feel compelled to. Your silence recruited them as allies. What could be more Machiavellian than turning enemies into your advocates without lifting a finger? Machiavelli knew that silence is strongest when paired with precise timing. Endless silence risks fading into irrelevance, but silence broken at the right moment becomes unforgettable. The man who does not speak often, when he finally chooses to speak, dominates every ear. Every syllable is magnified. The quiet ruler who delivers one sentence after hours of silence strikes harder than the man who has been talking all day. Words used sparingly cut deeper. They echo longer. They are remembered more vividly. This is the true art, to let silence build pressure until your single remark explodes like thunder. Let us walk into a negotiation again. You have been silent, listening, allowing the other side to reveal themselves. When you finally speak, it is not to argue or to defend, but to deliver one sharp line. If that is your best, we are done here. The silence that follows is crushing. They feel the weight of your restraint. They panic. They sweeten the deal. All because your silence was not passive. It was the prelude to a blade. In the realm of relationships, silence can redraw the balance of power. Imagine a partner constantly provoking you, fishing for reassurance, demanding explanations. If you give them what they want, they control the tempo. They learn that a jab produces a reaction. But when you refuse, when you calmly decline to defend or justify, they are left struggling with their own echo. At first, they may rage louder, but eventually they collapse into doubt. Why are you not fighting? Why are you not proving yourself? They begin to question not you, but themselves. Silence in this case is not distance. It is dominance. It is the invisible leash they do not realize you are holding. The silent weapon also operates through absence. To suddenly disappear, to withhold not just words but presence, is often more powerful than any speech. When you withdraw from those who took you for granted, they feel the void. They replay every interaction, searching for answers you never gave. They consult others, speculate wildly, obsess over the silence you left behind. Machiavelli would call this creating dependence. When you are present, they do not value you. When you vanish, they cannot breathe without you. Silence, then, is not only a weapon of the moment. It is a strategy of withdrawal that magnifies your influence by making others addicted to what is no longer there. Even in warfare, silence has always been a tactic. Armies that march without drums terrify more than those who make noise. A night when the enemy hears nothing is more dreadful than a night filled with clashing steel. The unknown, the unseen, the unspoken, these breed more fear than the obvious. Machiavelli drew from history to show that silence is not emptiness. It is the canvas on which fear paints its darkest images. A man who says nothing allows others to imagine everything. And imagination is often more cruel, more frightening, and more powerful than fact. Another quotable truth emerges. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of doubt. Doubt is the seed from which fear grows. Fear, in turn, is the soil where respect takes root. Machiavelli would insist that it is better to be feared than loved. But even more, it is better to be doubted than understood. Because doubt creates hesitation. And hesitation gives you control. But silence must be managed carefully. It is a double-edged blade. Used with composure, it makes you untouchable. Used carelessly, it makes you appear weak or confused. This is why Machiavelli paired silence with presence, stillness in the body, steadiness in the eyes, precision in the few words you do use. Silence must never look like retreat. It must look like design. The crowd must believe you are silent because you choose to be, not because you have nothing to say. That distinction is the difference between power and irrelevance. To master silence, you must practice it. Train yourself to endure the discomfort of pauses. Allow others to squirm while you remain still. Let the air grow heavy without rushing to fill it. In arguments, resist the impulse to defend. In debates, hold your words until others reveal themselves. In personal disputes, allow accusations to float unanswered. Each time you choose silence, you build strength. Each time you refuse explanation, you sharpen your weapon. Over time, silence becomes not only your strategy but your aura. You are no longer a man who needs to be understood. You are a presence that demands to be respected. The endgame of silence is aura. At this level, you do not even need to think about silence as a tactic. It becomes your nature. People hesitate before speaking your name, not because you are loud, but because your quiet presence has left such an impression that they cannot risk misunderstanding it. You do not answer to critics because critics no longer matter. You do not defend against accusations because accusations vanish before they land. You live above the noise, untouchable, unreadable, feared. And that is the final truth Machiavelli would deliver. Words may inspire, words may persuade, but silence rules. The man who speaks constantly is forgettable. The man who speaks rarely is unforgettable. The man who defends himself loses. The man who holds silence forces the world to defend him. The man who justifies his innocence looks guilty. The man who ignores accusation becomes untouchable. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not absence. Silence is the invisible crown worn by those who understand power at its deepest. It is the weapon no one sees until it is too late.